The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 8th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Then Jesus and his disciples arrived at the country of the Gerasenes, which is opposite Galilee. As Jesus stepped out on land, a man of the city who had demons met him. For a long time he had worn no clothes, and he did not live in a house but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he fell down before him and shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." For Jesus had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many times it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demons into the wilds. Jesus then asked him, "What is your name?" He said, "Legion," for many demons had entered him. They begged him not to order them to go back into the abyss. Now there on the hillside a large herd of swine was feeding, and the demons begged Jesus to let them enter these. So he gave them permission. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When the swineherd saw what had happened, they ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came out to see what had happened, and when they came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told them how the one who had been possessed by demons had been healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." So he went away, proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. The Gospel of the Lord. So there's an old saying, time is money. But in Jesus' day, really, pigs were money. And pigs were big money. Most people really did not measure the value of their wealth in terms of the number of coins in their pocket. But they instead valued it by the number of flocks and herds that they had. The thing is, since a pig was the kind of quintessential non-kosher animal, most of the time when we read in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament about people's flocks and herds, we read about flocks and herds of sheep or goats or cattle. No Jew would own a pig, let alone a herd of pigs. So if you were a Jew listening to this story, this is like a doubly good story. Jesus goes and he heals a guy who is possessed by demons. And then the demons run into the pigs, and all the pigs run like a herd of lemmings into the lake, and they all drown. So, like a cherry on top, not only has Jesus gotten rid of the demons, he's gotten rid of the pigs. It's great. This is wonderful, except Luke wrote to Gentiles. And Gentiles, they had no problem with pigs. Just like the Gerasenes, whom Jesus was visiting, they were Gentiles. They had no problem with pigs. So to them, when you hear this story, it kind of goes like this. Jesus cured this guy who had all these legion of demons in him, and all the demons ran into your 401k, which promptly tanked. That's how they experienced it. And that's why the swineherds ran into the city and went, "Oh my gosh, Jesus has just destroyed the banking system." And they all came out, and they were afraid. Now, in many of the stories about Jesus healing people, the first reaction that people have is they see this power, and it says, and Luke says, they were afraid. But often it just means, they were afraid because they had this kind of sense of awe of being very close to a really powerful thing. Kind of like when you're very close to a lightning strike and it goes boom, you go, okay, that's the kind of thing. But these Gerasenes, they were afraid for another reason. And maybe it was because they were not Jews and they had no kind of feeling that they needed to show any kind of pious respect to the God of Israel. What they were really afraid of was they correctly perceived that if Jesus was going to be present and active in their lives, it was going to cost them. It wasn't just going to be a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling, "Oh, God is here close to us, isn't this great?" But it was actually going to cost them. Perhaps more so than anybody up to this point in the Gospel of Luke. The Gerasenes realized that when Jesus showed up and started to transform the world around them, it was going to cost them financially. Jesus had literally hit them in their wallets. Their pigs were gone. But more than that, Jesus was also, and what Jesus was doing in their lives and around in their community, Jesus was costing them their routine. Somehow or other, even though this guy had to be chained up and kept out in the tombs because he was wild and crazy, they kind of knew how to deal with that. You know, here's this kind of crazy person, we keep him over here, we lock him up with the chains, occasionally he gets loose, we have to run around and chase him, we lock him back up, but we know how the routine works. But all of a sudden, he's cured, and he's sitting there. And they all stop what they're doing, they rush out, they see that the pigs are drowned, the guy is sitting there in his right mind, and now the whole system has to change. The whole routine has to be different, and they don't know how it's going to be different. And anytime somebody tells you, you can change, but it's going to really cost you your routine, that's a big cost. And they realize that. And maybe even more so, as they saw the guy sitting there in his right mind, they suddenly now realized that they were going to have to reassess their relationship with this guy who used to be demon-possessed, but was now an actual member of society. They were going to have to relate to him in a whole new way. They were going to have to reassess how they dealt with this other guy who used to be over there someplace, but now he's part of us. And how do we deal with that? And that was going to cost them. So even though the Gerasenes are never considered to be the great shining examples of positive and thankful recipients of Jesus' presence and gifts in the lives of other people, at least they're honest. They're honest because they recognize that having Jesus in their lives and having Jesus active in the world around them was not going to simply be an entertaining show. It wasn't just a nice feel-good experience. Instead, it was going to be a complete upending and upheaval of the world in which they lived, and it was not going to come without a cost to each one of them personally. That's why when they arrive on the scene and they see what's going on and they meet Jesus, they say, Jesus, please leave. Go away. This is going to cost us. And you see, that really does stand in contrast to so many of the ways that Jesus is marketed in our society. We like to think that Jesus did these great and wonderful things, and he did them for these poor, unfortunate folks. And when people saw what Jesus did, they went, wow, this is wonderful, this is great. Now I have a warm and fuzzy feeling in my heart. I've had a deep and personal spiritual experience of God, and I can go on my way with that wonderful warm feeling in my heart, just like I did before, and it's not going to cost me anything. It's just a nice feeling. That's what Jesus does. But that's never actually what happened. Whenever Jesus showed up in people's lives and did things in the lives of people or in the lives of their neighbors, it always came with a cost. If you want to be part of this new world that God is making, if you want to actually experience God active in your life, it ends up costing people, which is why so often when people say they see what Jesus is doing and they say, Lord, this is great, this is wonderful, thank you for being here, Jesus says, wonderful. I'm glad that you've had this nice, warm, fuzzy feeling in your heart and it's great for you. Now, stop what you're doing and come and follow me. Almost always, people go, no, I can't do that. You know, I should just be able to go on about what I'm doing. It shouldn't have to cost me my money, my routine, my reassessment of my relationship with other people. But it's not what happened with the Gerasenes. And it's actually not what happened ever if you read the stories closely enough. So today, even when we recognize intellectually this was never how it worked in the Bible, we don't like realizing that it's not the way it can work for us either. If we really want Jesus in our lives, if we really want Jesus to be transforming the world around us, and if we want to be part of that transformation, it is always going to end up costing us. But we don't like that. We don't like to be told that. We want to be told that grace is free, right? Because grace is free, and therefore, because grace is free, it should not cost us our pigs. Our money, financially. And maybe I'll give a pig or two to some good cause or the church or something if I have a pig left over, but it shouldn't cause me. Having Jesus in my life should not cause me to have to reassess how I spend my money, what I do with my money, how much of my money I give away, whether I take money and care for somebody else other than me. I should not ever have this feeling that my pigs are running off the cliff. That's what we like to be told. We like to be told that having Jesus in our lives and active among us will not cause us to have to change the way we live our lives. Oh, sure, I realize I should be nicer to people. I really should be nicer to people. And I should do things to help other people out when I have the opportunity. But changing my routine and my priorities, it's a lot easier if I just say, I'll follow Jesus when I get a chance. When I have the time. When nothing else is going on, that'll be okay. It's not kind of like, come and follow me right now. I got other things to do first. And we don't like to be told that that's the way it works for us, too. We also get squeamish at the idea that somehow or other, having Jesus in our life and transforming the world around us means that somehow we're going to have to reevaluate our relationship with those other people. People that are just the strange people, the weird people. The people that I've never had to deal with because they're over there someplace, just like that Gerasene demoniac. He was kept over there, and I know Jesus loves them too, and it's great. But can't Jesus love them over there, and I will stay well over here? Isn't that the way it works? And it was not the way that it worked with Jesus and his first disciples. It was never the way it worked. Jesus was always bringing people together, telling them that, you know what, those other people are people that God has called you into relationship with, and you got to deal with them. So often, we want to be told that we don't have to deal with that. That was something the Gerasenes had to deal with that, but not us. That's a great thing, and that's what we want to be told, but it's a lie. It's a lie we want to be told, it's a lie we want to believe. And it's a lie that we got to be particularly aware of whenever there's all kinds of big trauma in the world around us. So, last weekend, at a time that we didn't even realize as we were sitting here in church, just before then, this deranged gunman walked into a gay nightclub with an AR-15, killed 49 people, wounded 54 more, called and pledged allegiance to ISIS before the police finally were able to kill him. And in the end, it was horrible and tragic, unlike the healing of the demoniac, but like that story, everybody was scared. And everybody wanted to know, what do we do next? Life stopped. And we went, oh my gosh, now what? And in the past week, there has been all kinds of swirl of controversies, which are now really all too familiar. What should we do about guns? How can we protect and support vulnerable communities like gays and lesbians or racial minorities or Muslims in this country who are mostly very upset about this too, in fact because their religion's being defiled? What should we do about terrorism and the homegrown variety especially? I do not have all the answers to any of these questions, but I do know this. The lie that always gets told, the lie that we always want to believe, is that somehow all of these big, important, and difficult questions can be solved in a way that will not cost us. At least it will not cost you, and it will not cost me. Maybe somebody else, but it can somehow be it can be solved. These things can be solved without it somehow costing us. That's the lie. And when Jesus calls us to be people who engage in these questions, engage in our world, to be his agents of transformation, we cannot go about it figuring that there's got to be some interesting little way we can figure it out that will not also cost us. Because any kind of solution, any kind of real solution to any big problem we face in our world, anything that Jesus calls us to deal with, is ultimately going to cost us our money. There has never really been a solution to any problem I can think of, any significant problem, that has not required all of us to put our money where our mouth is. I mean, I would love to believe that it was not that way, and it would only take a little bit from, but pretty much everything that's a big problem in our lives requires all of us, not just some of us, putting our money where our mouth is. Everything that's been a big, major problem in our lives, in our society, has always required us to pay the cost of changing the way our routine works and the way we do business. I mean, after 9/11, we did all kinds of things differently, even though they were obnoxious, and they were difficult, and they were inconvenient. But we realized the only way to solve the problem, it was going to cost us our routine, just like it cost the Gerasenes their routine. And maybe even more so. We also got to realize that there is no way to solve a lot of these problems without re-examining our relationship with people that we consider the other. The folks that, yeah, I know God loves them, and I know they're out there, but I don't really want to have to deal with them on a regular basis. And whether that person is a gay person in a nightclub, or an African American person being targeted for their race, or a Muslim person who goes, oh my gosh, every time one of these things happens, people look at me and think I'm one of these nutty terrorist people, or anybody else that we don't normally interact with. All of those people, whenever we allow ourselves to be divided and kind of divided up into different groups and to go, you know what, that's a problem for those people, or those people, or those people over there, we end up perpetuating the problem because we allow the evil and the demons to get us because they're dividing us all up into little groups, and I go, okay, that's not my problem. When Jesus healed the demoniac, he put the demoniac right in the guy who used to be the demoniac, right in the middle of the community and said, okay, look, here he is. This person now is part of you. It's not us and them, it's all you. So whenever we have a situation like this, I'm always reminded of a quote from Martin Niemöller. Martin Niemöller was a German Lutheran pastor during the Second World War, and he opposed the Nazis, but not real forcefully at first. And he ended up in a concentration camp, survived. And later on, he had this to say about kind of reflecting on what happened and his own part in it. He says, first, they came for the socialists. And I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. And I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. And I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. And there was no one left to speak for me. See, in spite of what we often like to think, there is always a cost to following Jesus and having Jesus actively involved in our lives. It has always been that way. But when we're willing to accept that cost, we experience more fully the power and the presence of God in our lives. When we're willing to accept that cost, Jesus transforms us into instruments of change in the life of the world around us. And when we're willing to accept that cost, others in our world also can come to experience the power and the presence of Jesus because of how Jesus is able to work through each one of us.